Hello everyone, it's Lindsay, and today I'm back with another Bible journaling process for you guys. I am working through the current devotional kit from ByTheWell4God. This is Tetelestai. You guys, the devotional content in this one is so good. I have been savoring it, taking all the notes. I kind of shared over on Instagram kind of a new approach that I am taking for this particular study. So you can head on over to Instagram. I saved it in a highlight on my feed. So towards the top of my feed, there's little circle bubbles. There's one labeled Tetelestai. So then you can see I kind of go into details for this page. I did not do a video for this one, so I kind of go into how I did it on Instagram, and I also kind of talk about how I'm working through this. And so what I am doing, or I guess in the past what I've done, is I've just kind of read through it. I would sit down to create, and then I would just look at the day, see what I'm going to pull out, kind of, it would just take a long time. So this time what I'm doing as I go through this is that as I read it, I have a little notepad of sticky notes. These ones are from Target. You can use anything. It does not have to be anything fancy. And I'm trying to read through and study and kind of give myself chunks of information. And what this does in my brain is that each one of these could be a ephemera piece on my Bible journaling page. So I'm wanting to be more intentional about the information that I get down in my Bible journaling. Typically, if you've been watching any of my process videos, I keep it very simple. Usually it's maybe just a quote, journal out a prayer most oftentimes. Don't really take a whole lot of notes or word studies or things like that. And I want to be better about getting those into my Bible in addition to, the pretty fun part and the prayer part. So as I read through, I just try to pull out, first and foremost, what verse I think I'm going to focus on. I don't necessarily journal every single day in these devotionals. So, I may not have anything that I pull from that day that I'm going to journal, and that's okay too. I might just take some random notes, but I try to pull a verse so I know what verse I'm going to journal. In this case, I'm journaling in 2 Corinthians 5:20 through 21. It says, "Therefore, we are ambassadors for Christ, as though God were making an appeal through us. We beg you on behalf of Christ, be reconciled to God. He made him who knew no sin to be sin in our behalf, so that we might become the righteousness of God in him." And so this is for day 2 of Tetelestai, and Judy has us kind of looking past the brutality of the death of Christ and his crucifixion, and look at what was spiritually done for us during that. And so she says, take time to ponder the cost of your salvation, not only physically but spiritually. So that's the passage we're going to be journaling in. And then as I go through the study, I love to use the Blue Letter Bible app. There's some great commentary. You can Google commentary. I like David Guzik, Matthew Henry, John MacArthur. There's a few that I kind of go to regularly, and then I kind of look at others just to kind of compare and contrast and see what the common finding is for that passage. So as I was going through the commentary, I found this quote from Spurgeon. He says, "Christ was not guilty and could not be made guilty, but he was treated as if he were guilty because he willed to stand in the place of the guilty." Yeah, he was not only treated as a sinner, but he was treated as if he had been sin itself in the abstract. This is an amazing utterance. The sinless one was made to be sin. Powerful. So that may end up in my journaling entry. And then I found a cross-reference as I was doing my study for Isaiah 53:12. Says, and remember, Isaiah, this is before Jesus. They did not know Jesus or how that was going to unfold, Jesus being crucified, things like that. We're looking at the Old Testament. So Isaiah 53:12 says, "Therefore I will allot him a portion with the great, and he will divide the spoils with the strong, because he has poured out his life unto death, and he was numbered with the transgressors." That's referring to Jesus. He was numbered with the transgressors. "Yet he bore the sin of many and made intercession for the transgressors." Really powerful. Again, that's why I think it's so important to study the Old Testament and the New Testament. I know that there is a trend in some churches and denominations to kind of just, the Old Testament's old, it's no good, let's just focus on the New Testament. And I think that you are doing yourself such a hindrance. Just learning more about God's character and how the whole story unfolds. The entire Old Testament is pointing to Jesus in the New Testament. So really highly encourage you, especially Isaiah. That's a really good book with a lot in it. And then I decided to do a word study as well. So I went through the cards. These are an add-on that you can get from the release. These are little flashcards. They have a word and a scripture. And so typically what I'll do is when I sit down for that day, I'll look through these to see if there is one for, the scripture for that day. And then I may just use it as a layering element, may do a word study. In this case, I did do a word study. Just a real quick one, not like my typical word studies that I do on Wednesdays. That is a more in-depth, detailed word study. This is just a really quick one. Just write down the definition, what the Greek or Hebrew word is, the Strong's Concordance number, and maybe some notes if I need notes, but left it pretty simple. This month at ByTheWell4God, they released these journaling cards that are word exploration cards. So these are perfect if you are wanting to dive into word studies, if you've been watching my word study Wednesdays and you're kind of intrigued by it, but intimidated by the art part and just want to focus on the word study part, these cards would be great. So they're just blank printed on the back. You got a place for the word, definition, and then explore it. What did you find? Did you find cross references? How many times it's used? Maybe the root word it comes out of? Maybe unique instances in how it's used. I mean, whatever it might be, you can write that there and then have a little word study. So I'm actually going to turn this into a tag. I had a lot of questions after I showed this page on Instagram, how I combined all these elements to make a tag out of it. So I will be doing that again today to show you. And then we'll be playing around with some other elements. So as I go forward in the study, as you can see, I'm reading through the days, and same thing, maybe some notes from the devotional, key scriptures in here somewhere, I'm sure. I've got word study, just lots and lots and lots of notes that I'm taking. And then that way, when I sit down to create, I've already kind of got the key points that I want down in my Bible journaling. So that might be helpful for you guys if you're struggling combining the study time with Bible journaling and not quite sure what to include, or you feel like it's taking a long time. Go through the study first and then sit down and do the art part, that might work a little better for you. So again, we're working in 2 Corinthians 5:20 through 21. I have a selection of elements pulled out here to do this page. It shouldn't be too complicated. So let me go ahead, put you guys on fast forward, and we'll put together this Bible journaling entry. Okay, so I'm going to try to do this with a parking lot full of youth group kiddos behind me. I'm doing this in my car on a Wednesday night, but it's the sound of laughter and joy. So if you can hear it, we're just going to enjoy the fact that kiddos can be back at youth group, right? After 2 years. Anyways, so diving into the page here, I'm starting with a very simple background. This is an old technique I've done several times over the years using a fluffy makeup brush. This is just a $1 blush brush. And I'm dusting on some antique linen distress oxide ink onto the page. I just go in with a very, very soft hand and slowly build up the color. That is a really easy way to get a colored background, but you know me, I need texture. So I'm going through my Tim Holtz stamps. I'm slowly accumulating a collection of these. This one here, I can't remember the name of it. It's probably Damask or something similar to that. I will have it linked down below for you guys. These are nice and big. They've got grunge to them, lots of texture. They're amazing. So I'm going to use this to add some more background interest. So I pulled out a Versamagic chalk ink in the color Wheat. I didn't want to stamp with the antique linen Distress Oxide because sometimes those Distress Oxide inks can bleed through, which I'll show you towards the end of the video. So I thought this would be a safer way to still get that little bit of color in the background, not too dark, and not having to worry about bleed through. So you can see I did not put this on a block. I'm just using a brayer, which is not the ideal way to do that because it does shift the stamp around a little bit, but it was fine because it's just background. And then I wanted to soften it just a little bit, so I'm just using some Picket Fence Distress Spray Stain, making a huge mess all over myself. Yes, I have gone to parent-teacher conferences like that. Yes, it's been many years, but I have shown up to a conference covered in paint. So I set that aside to dry, and then now we're going to work on this element here. This is using this Stained by Love stamp set. This is one of the new ones, and I'm going to use some embossing glazes to give this really cool faux stained glass. Now you could do this on acetate or vellum. I chose just to do it on cardstock just for simplicity's sake, but you could get really fancy with clear mediums as well. Now I'm going to ink this up first with VersaFine Onyx Black ink. In hindsight, I probably would have done an archival ink or something, stays on, something that dries really fast. But it just need to heat set it, make sure that that black ink is really, really good and dry. So here I'm showing you, I'm going to be using some embossing glazes. Now these are translucent. And so the color purple that I had is the Villainous Potion. It's one of the new colors. It's a beautiful purple color, but it's not quite the right purple for this kit. The completed piece on the right hand side there, I used it just as is, but because these are translucent, you can layer things underneath them. So to change the color, get more bang for your buck with these, you can ink underneath them, you can use markers, you know, however you want to color underneath it. So I just used a Faber-Castell brush marker in Pink Madder Lake, colored in the cross, and then now we're going to add the glaze. So I've made sure to use my EK Success powder tool. You'll see me use that 1,000 times with this project. And then I'm using an embossing pen to color in the cross area where I want the embossing powder to stick. Now this is just a clear sticky pen. It's the same thing as like a Versamark ink pad, just put in pen form. So you want to work one color at a time with this technique. So it does take a little bit of time, but it's worth it in the end. So you can see here I dumped that Villainous Potion Distress Glaze over the embossing ink, and then I'll go ahead and heat set that. And I don't know if you'll catch it on camera, but the color is a better match to the kit with that pink underneath it. So I made sure that that was cool, and then I went back in with my powder tool, and now we're just going to move on to the next section. So I'm using the embossing pen to fill in the little tiles around the cross shape. You do want to try to stay in the lines best you can. Remember, anywhere where this goes, embossing powder is going to stick. So you can brush it off before you heat set it, but just take your time. It is a little tricky because it's clear, so it's hard to see where you've put it, but just work slowly, methodically, gets the job done. So I heat set that gray, I think that's hickory smoke, applied my powder tool again, and then now I'm going in with the background. So I've picked out a bigger tipped pen. I'm covering the whole background of that, and then I'm using some antique linen distress glaze. Sorry guys, I really don't feel good today, so I'm having a hard time with my words. We'll get through it. One thing is when you emboss, typically you just kind of tap the paper to tap the excess off. You don't want to flick it, because when you flick it, it removes too much of the embossing powder. But for this technique and what I'm going to do here in a minute, I do want to expose some of the paper. So I know it's really, really sped up, but I'm kind of flicking the back of the paper to get some of the excess powder off before I heat set it. And what that's going to do is reveal some of the paper. It's going to kind of thin it out. And so when I add Distress Crayon, that's going to attach to the paper. And then you saw here before I added that brown, there were some areas where I didn't want it. So I just take a dry paintbrush before I heat set it, and then I can brush that powder away. So now everything has been heat set. Everything's colored in, and then now I'm going to go in with a Walnut Stain Distress Crayon. You could also use a Gelato. They're kind of similar, and they would work for this technique. So I'm just coloring over the top of this and then using my finger to kind of burnish that crayon down into the nooks and crannies. This is a very, very faint look. If you flick more of the powder off, you'll get more grunge to it. I just want it to kind of look vintagey to match the rest of the kit and what I'm going to do with this page. And then I just spray a little bit of water on a paper towel and wipe away the excess crayon that's on top of the glaze. Now, ideally you would do the crayon step after this next step I'm doing here. So I know the power of editing, I could have reversed it, but that takes a lot of work. So let me walk you through this and then I'll tell you what I would have done differently. So I've put this back into my stamp platform. As you can see, I had left that cross stamp in the same exact position. That way I could double stamp. So now I'm going to go ahead and ink this up again with the VersaFine ink. You could also ink it up with Versamark. It just needs to be a sticky ink. And then I'm going to go ahead and cover this with some gold embossing powder. And this is going to give you that look of like gold metallic lead in between the stained glass. So it's just stamping right over the black lines, adding that gold embossing powder so it's only sticking to the lines, and it's going to really transform the look of this piece. There is kind of a comparison there. We're on track. So ideally I would have done the gold embossing before I did the crayon. If your crayon isn't all the way dry, it might be kind of tacky and sticky and it would grab a hold of that gold embossing powder. So you do want to make sure that you do all of your embossing first and then go in with the crayon. I use my decal trimmer just to cut away some of the excess paper. I did leave a little bit of a frame, so it's going to look like a wooden frame around this glass piece. I am going to go ahead and ink that up with some Gathered Twigs Distress Oxide. When I'm blending on paper, just naked paper, I prefer oxides. If I'm blending on something that's coated or I'm wanting to add kind of a vintage like stained effect, you'll see me do this later on with the tag, I prefer the original Distress stains. So you just kind of have to use what works for you, what you prefer. That's just kind of what I like. So there is a look. Now on the left-hand side, I used just regular cheap cardstock. On the right-hand side, I'd used nice quality cardstock from Tim Holtz. Highly recommend that. That is what I will link down below because it is so much better than the cheapy stuff. The cheapy stuff has its place, like when it's going through my typewriter or things like that, but for creating ephemera pieces, that thicker cardstock is much better. So moving on to the tag, I went ahead and typed out the definition for righteousness on one of the pattern papers that you can get as an add-on. And then I just cut that out with my decal trimmer as well, just to add a little bit of interest to the edge of that. And then we're going to distress everything. So here's what I'm talking about. I'm using the Distress Stain, or ink, Distress ink, original Distress ink to blend the edges of this paper because this particular paper is coated. I'm wanting kind of a deeper color, so I go for the original Distress inks. And then if you caught my video on Wednesday, you know I'm loving these new foundry waxes from Tim Holtz. They're amazing. They come out as a liquid. As it interacts with the air, it turns into a wax. And then the longer it's exposed to air, it turns into a powder. So you have a limited window of time to work with it. I'm kind of dabbing my finger in it until it starts to thicken, and then I'm wiping it along the edges of this little piece of paper. If you have more questions about the foundry wax, check out Wednesday's Tip Tuesday. It was a word study Wednesday video that I went into more detail on how to use that foundry wax. You do want to make sure that you put the lid back on the foundry wax in between usage because like I said, when it's exposed to the air, it turns into like a powder. So you don't want to leave it open. And then you do have to heat set this. That's how you make it permanent. And that's what really brings out the shine. And so you want to make sure that you don't have your heat source near the bottle of the foundry wax because you could potentially ruin it in the bottle. So I'll link Tim Holtz's video down below where he announced this product. He goes into extreme detail on how to use it and how not to use it. He's going to do a much better job than me because he created it. So check out that video if you have questions about it. It's going to be on literally everything on my desk for the foreseeable future. So while I was talking about foundry wax, I was assembling this card, and you'll see I used one of the flash cards, one of the word exploration cards, and then some pattern paper, and created this like zombie tag. I just kind of stuck everything together, not zombie, Frankenstein's tag. And then now I'm just inking everything up and distressing it. You'll see I kind of folded over some edges and added some ink there too, just to really make it nice and distressed. And then now I'm going to go in and add some more foundry wax to the rest of the tag. So I'm using the gilded color here. I like the kind of more vintage gold one. I can't think of the name of it at the moment, but this one matched the embossing powder that I had used on that stamped image. And you'll see I just put a little bit out at a time on a non-stick surface. This is just a laminated piece of cardstock, and I kind of dab my finger around in it until it starts to thicken, and then I apply it to the edges. You don't want to go over the same spot more than once. Here I'm showing you what's heat set and what's not heat set. So the bottom of that definition is heat set. The outside edge of the tag is not, and so you can see the difference in the metallic between heat set and not heat set. This stuff is amazing. The video does not do it justice. When you see it in person, it's amazing. So I made sure I heat set all the edges of that tag. I had hole punched it when I snipped the edges and did all that, and so I just added an eyelet into the tag there. So now we can move on to kind of pulling all the things together. So I pulled some of the floral clusters from the kit, and then these two bottom frames are from the kit as well. I just cut away a lot of the white border, and I will distress these with that Gathered Twigs distress ink as well. But before I glue everything down, I want to add a little something else to this background. So I'm trying to use up the stamp that comes with the kit. So there's this big bold Tetelestai title. So I'm going to ink that up with some Victorian Velvet Distress Oxide ink and stamp that down. Now here's what I mean. I stamped with oxide ink. So when I flip this page over, you'll be able to see there is some ghosting, a hint of bleed through when I stamped with this ink. And that's why I chose to use the chalk ink when I stamped the background. I could have done the same for this, but I was lazy. This was a color I knew would work. And so I just grabbed this. And then I also stamped that it is finished into that other little open space there. So I adhered these cards just temporarily to a piece of cardstock, ran it through my typewriter, and typed out that verse from Isaiah. I thought it would run into both frames. It didn't quite, so I'm just have the verse on the one frame, and then I'm going to put the verse address on this other frame. I kind of went back and forth because I wanted that Spurgeon quote on here as well. I'll end up writing that on the back of the card. I thought I could include it on one of these frames, but it was just too long of a quote. That wasn't going to work. So I'm just using some stickers from the kit, and then these are some add-on tile alphas to spell out Isaiah 53:12, which is that verse that's a cross-reference to these verses in 2 Corinthians. Alrighty, so we are just about there. I am going to go ahead and finish off this word exploration card. Like I said at the beginning, these word studies that I do through this kit are a lot simpler than the word study Wednesdays that I do. You could do them the same elaborate way, but I just do them a little bit more simple. So I just put the transliteration down there and then the Strong's Concordance number. If I had come across any, notes that I wanted to include, I could include those on the back of the tag. And then here's where I'm going in and just distressing everything with the Gathered Twigs Distress ink. I could have added gold to the edge of these as well, but I didn't want to overdo it. I felt like I kind of overdid the foundry wax on Wednesday. Not that I think you can overdo it because it's amazing, but I didn't want to overdo it on this page. So I just kept it very simple. I am inking up the flowers as well. This is a great way to kind of make your die cuts, especially your printables, look, a little extra special, is to add distress ink. It doesn't even have to be brown. If grunge is not your thing, you could use a color. You could use, tattered rose or even antique linen, old paper, some of those lighter colors. Just add a little interest to that piece. So for the top of this tag, I could have used some of the fabric in the kit, but I had this piece of lace laying on my desk. This was some lace trim that was white, and then I just sprayed with some antique linen distress spray like weeks ago. I used it for another project, and this was just some leftover on my desk. I love the look that antique linen does to the white lace. So I just tied a little bow. Like I said, I'll put that Spurgeon quote on the back of that tag. And then as a finishing touch, I received these pink fresh gold droplets. I don't know what the formal term is for them. I will have them linked down below for you guys. They were like a freebie gift from scrapbook.com. So if you didn't know, I am an affiliate with scrapbook.com. I don't talk about that a whole bunch, but I do list for scrapbook.com. And they very often have free gifts with your order. So depending on how much you're spending, or if you're ordering certain products from certain areas of the shop, they'll have free gifts. And so this was a free gift, I think like a week or so ago, that I got with one of my orders. So I'm just using a pickup stick and a little bit of glue to stick those on. And it was just a great way to kind of add a little bit more gold to pull all that together on this page. Now they are super dimensional. They are hard. They're not spongy and soft. So if you don't want that in your Bible, then definitely skip these, but they're super pretty and fun. Went ahead and just highlighted the verse. Again, that's 2 Corinthians 5:20 through 21. And then I will use a tiny little paper clip from Felicity Jane to attach that tag. And then real quick there, you could see on the back, there was just a tiny little bit of ghosting from that purple stamping, but nothing too bad. So there is a look at the finished page. If you have any questions or comments, be sure to leave those down below for me. Check out the description box for links to everything that I used in this video. Give this video a thumbs up if you enjoyed it. Subscribe to my channel if you're not already subscribed. And until next time, thank you so much. Bye-bye.